They say mountains are solid, ancient, immovable. They are wrong. The Appalachians are hollow, and they are hungry. Most of you look at a ridgeline and see a challenge to be hiked or a view to be photographed. You see the green canopy, the morning mist rolling off the peaks, the safety of the marked trail. That is the surface lie. That is the mask the oldest mountain range on Earth wears to lure you in. Beneath that thin layer of soil and root systems lies a labyrinth that predates humanity, a black tangled knot of limestone and granite that has been waiting in the dark since the continents first smashed together. It is a world of absolute, crushing silence, where the air is stale with the breath of things that have never seen the sun. And sometimes, if you are quiet enough, or unlucky enough, you realize that the silence isn't empty. It is listening. Tonight, we aren't talking about hikers who lost their way or campers spooked by a bear. We are talking about the abyss. We are talking about the predatory geography that sits right beneath your feet, waiting for a single misstep to swallow you whole. I have spent years gathering these accounts, scraping them from the bottom of forgotten forums, decoding manic journal entries found in water-damaged backpacks, and listening to the whispered confessions of people who came back from the underground. Wrong. These are the stories that don't make the park ranger reports. These are the incidents that get filed under unexplained disappearance because the truth is too jagged to fit into a police file. You have to understand something about caves before we begin. The darkness down there isn't just an absence of light. It is a physical weight. It presses against your eyes, trying to push them back into your skull. It has mass. When you turn off your headlamp in a deep cave, you aren't just in the dark. You are inside the throat of a beast that is slowly digesting the concept of time itself. Minutes feel like hours. Up becomes a suggestion. And the geometry. The geometry stops playing by the rules you learned in school. I have 9 stories for you tonight. 9 nightmares pulled from the deepest cracks of the Appalachian wilderness. Some of these involve things that look human but move like insects. Some involve spaces that shouldn't exist, rooms carved with precision inside solid rock where no tool has ever been. And some involve the terrifying realization that the cave itself might be alive, shifting its tunnels like a restless sleeper to keep you inside forever. Why am I telling you this? Because ignorance isn't protection. It's a dinner bell. There is a specific kind of claustrophobia that hits you when you realize the rock above your head is miles thick. It's a primal squeeze on your heart. It whispers that you don't belong here, that you are an intruder in a house built for something else. And you are. The entities in these stories, the things holding red lollipops in the dark, the voices that mimic your best friend, the shadows that peel off the wall, they are the homeowners. We are just the pests crawling through the drywall. I need you to listen closely, not just to entertain yourself, but because once you hear these patterns, you will start to see them. You might notice the way a shadow stretches too far in your hallway. You might hear a clicking sound in your basement that doesn't match the settling of the house. You might feel a draft of cold, dead air in a warm room and wonder where it's coming from. Knowledge is a virus, and I am infecting you. By the time we reach the end of this journey, you won't look at a hole in the ground the same way ever again. You will understand why the locals in these mountain towns lock their doors not against thieves, but against the night itself. We are going to descend together, layer by layer. We will crawl through tight squeezes that scrape the skin off your back. We will rappel into chambers so vast your light dies before it hits the ceiling. And we will stand on the edge of pits that have no bottom, listening to the echoes of things that are climbing up to meet us. Are you ready? Good. Because there is no turning back now. The rope has already been cut. Our descent begins not in a cave, but in a place that felt like one. A rotting, warped structure that smelled of old wood and neglect. It starts in Briar, Kentucky, a town you won't find on a GPS, down a gravel road that twists like a broken spine. This is where my Uncle Lynn lived, in a cabin that leaned hard to the left, groaning under the weight of its own decay. It was the kind of place where the forest didn't just surround the house. It leaned in, pushing against the windows, testing the glass. Lynn was a hard man. A man who didn't believe in much except warm beer and unfiltered cigarettes. He wasn't afraid of the dark, or the woods, or the silence. He didn't lock his doors because he figured there was nothing inside worth taking. He was wrong. There was something nearby that wanted to come in. something that had been waiting in a crack in the earth, known only as split mouth. Let's go to the cabin. Let's step onto that groaning porch and listen to the metronome clank of the ceiling fan. Because the first warning didn't come from a scream. It came from the dirt itself, the smiling nothing of Split Mouth Cave. Let's start where the rot begins. My Uncle Lynn lived in a place that time forgot, and God certainly didn't visit. His cabin was nestled in a hollow outside Briar, Kentucky, down a road that was less gravel and more of a suggestion carved into the mud. The house itself looked like it had been nailed together by a drunk carpenter in the dark during the Hoover administration and then left to decompose. Every single line of the structure was wrong. The porch listed heavily to the left. The windows were mismatched sizes like eyes that couldn't focus, and the front steps groaned with a sound that was less like wood bending and more like something in pain. Lynn was the kind of man who fit the house. He didn't believe in refrigeration. He drank his beer warm straight from the case sitting on the kitchen floor. He smoked unfiltered cigarettes that stained his fingers yellow, and he swore by a single, wobbly ceiling fan that clanked overhead like a metronome for lunatics. But the thing that always unsettled me, even as a kid, was the doors. He never locked them. Not the front, not the back. He claimed there wasn't a damn thing out here worth taking, and anyone dumb enough to try would regret it before they crossed the threshold. I spent my summers there, wandering the woods while my mother went off to test drive a new boyfriend in the city. It was boring, mostly, throwing rocks at tin cans, listening to the static on the radio, but the boredom broke when Lynn started drinking and talking about the ridge. He had stories, the kind that start funny and end with you staring out the window into the pitch black, wondering what's looking back. The story that stuck, the one that burrowed into my brain like a tick, was about a cave he called Split Mouth. It wasn't on any survey map. You wouldn't find it unless you tripped over it. Lynn said the locals called it Split Mouth because the entrance looked like someone had taken a dull knife and slashed a crooked grin right into the side of the limestone hill. He'd gone in once, decades ago, on a teenage dare. He made it 30 feet before he felt the air change. He said it got heavy, like the stone was inhaling. He said he felt noticed. He turned around and walked out, and he never went back. He never laughed when he told that part. Naturally, being a stupid kid with too much time and not enough survival instinct, I became obsessed. I badgered him for weeks. I wanted to see the grin in the hill. I wanted to feel the stone breathe. Finally, one humid Tuesday in July, he cracked. "All right," he said, ash falling from his cigarette onto his plate. "But we take Duke. If the dog won't go in, we head home. That's the rule." Duke was a hound mix, mostly ribs and patchy fur, lazy as the day is long. But he had a nose that could track a ghost, and a bark that rattled your teeth. We set off up the ridge, the heat sitting on us like a wet blanket. The trail wasn't really a trail. It was a memory of a path, choked with briars and tall grass. We hiked for an hour, sweat stinging our eyes, until the woods suddenly went quiet. I don't mean the birds stopped singing. I mean the silence dropped like a guillotine. Duke stopped dead. He didn't whine. He didn't bark. He just froze, one paw raised, his hackles standing up in a ridge along his spine. Slowly, stiffly, he lowered his belly to the dirt. A sound came out of him that I will never forget. It wasn't a growl from his throat. It was a vibration that seemed to rumble up from the ground itself, channeling through his body. His eyes were fixed on a patch of brush about 20 yards ahead. "Duke," Lynn said. His voice was tight. The dog didn't look at him. He stared at that empty space for one more second, then spun around and bolted. He didn't run like a dog chasing a rabbit. He ran like an animal fleeing a fire. He tore back down the trail toward the cabin without looking back once. Lynn stood there, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Well," he muttered, "that ain't good. By all rights, we should have turned around. That was the rule. But human curiosity is a fatal flaw, and Lynn was a stubborn man. He stepped forward and pulled back the brush. There it was. Split Mouth. It was exactly as he described. A horizontal tear in the earth, jagged and cruel, barely 3 feet high at the widest point. Moss hung over it like a ragged lip. You could feel the cold air pushing out of it, smelling of wet iron and deep, stagnant water. It was an exhale from the lungs of the mountain. 10 minutes, Lynn said, checking his watch. We go to the first fork, then we turn around. We had to belly crawl. The entrance was tight, forcing us to twist our shoulders to squeeze through the limestone teeth. I went first, my headlamp cutting a shaky beam into the dark. The moment I crossed the threshold, the temperature plummeted. It wasn't just cool. It was the kind of cold that settles behind your eyes. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the scraping of our canvas jackets against the rock and the wet, rhythmic slap of our palms on the damp floor. The walls were slick. I noticed gouges in the stone, deep, parallel scratches that didn't look like tool marks. They were erratic, crisscrossing without pattern, some deep enough to hide a finger in. They looked like something had been dragged backward, fighting for purchase. 50 feet in, we hit the fork. The left tunnel angled up, hinting at airflow. The right tunnel dipped sharply down, tightening into a throat that looked barely wide enough for a child. Right loops a bit and dead ends, Lynn whispered. The acoustics were weird here. His voice sounded flat, stripped of bass. Let me check the structure. He moved to examine the left wall. I, driven by some idiot impulse, shined my light down the right tunnel. It looked tight, terrible, and thrilling. I just wanted to see around the bend. Just a peek. I dropped to my stomach and inched forward into the right tunnel. The rock pressed down on my spine. I had to use my elbows to drag myself, counting the scrapes to keep my panic at bay. 1, drag. 2, drag. The walls were inches from my ears. I could hear my own blood rushing. A riptide in my head. The tunnel opened up suddenly into a low, round chamber, maybe 4 feet high. I scrambled out of the squeeze and sat up, stretching my back. It opens up, I yelled back. Silence. Uncle Lynn? My voice bounced off the wet walls. Lynn. Lynn too fast, too sharp. I turned around, expecting to see the beam of his light in the tunnel behind me. There was nothing, just the black hole I had crawled through. No light, no scuffing of boots, no heavy breathing of a smoker. Lynn! I shouted again. The panic flared, hot and bright. My headlamp made a faint, high-pitched electrical buzz in the silence. I spun in a slow circle, checking the chamber. And that's when I saw it. There was another opening. Not the one I came through. A smaller fissure, hidden behind a bulge of flowstone near the floor. It was tiny, barely big enough for a cat, let alone a person. Then I heard the sound. Scrape, pause, scrape. It was rhythmic, soft, wet, like a fork being dragged slowly across a granite countertop. It was coming from inside that tiny hole. I froze. My breath caught in my throat like a jagged stone. I aimed my light at the hole. Nothing but shadow. But the sound changed. It stopped scraping. It became a rhythm of air. Huh. Slow, deliberate inhalations, drawn through clenched teeth. I scooted back, my boots sliding on the mud. My light beam wavered, then caught something at the very edge of the fissure. A figure was crouching there, just beyond the reach of the light. It looked human, but the proportions were all wrong. It was compacted into the space, limbs folded in on themselves like an origami made of wet paper. Its back was arched at an impossible angle, shoulders hunched up around its ears. At first, my brain tried to make sense of it. Lost hiker, another kid, a prank. Then I saw what it was holding. Clutched in a pale, long-fingered hand was a red lollipop. One of those cheap, flat, circular ones you get at a bank or a doctor's office. The white stick was bent at the end, chewed and soggy. The absurdity of it hit me harder than the fear. A lollipop. Here, miles from nowhere, buried in the dark. The thing was perfectly still. Its skin wasn't white. It was the color of nothing. It was the color of dust that had forgotten what sunlight looked like. It had no texture. It was just a void in the shape of a person. Then, it moved. It didn't lunge. It didn't scream. It just tilted its head. The movement was mechanical, a series of ticks like a clockwork toy. Tick, tilt, tick, tilt. It turned its face toward the light. I saw a cheekbone, a shallow brow, and a smile. It wasn't smiling at me. It wasn't a smile of aggression. It was a private smile. The look someone has when they remember the punchline to a joke they heard 20 years ago. It was a smile of absolute, terrifying contentment. It stared past me, through the rock, through the earth, holding that soggy red lollipop like a holy relic. It started to unfold. A knee jerked upward with a wet pop. An elbow twisted the wrong way. It was coming out. I didn't think. I didn't scream. I scrambled backward, hitting the far wall hard enough to bruise bone. I threw myself back into the tunnel I'd come from, ignoring the sharp rocks tearing at my shirt. I crawled. I clawed at the stone, kicking my legs, scraping the skin off my elbows. A hand grabbed my ankle. I screamed then, a sound that tore my throat raw. "It's me! It's me, boy!" It was Lynn. His flashlight beam blinded me. I was halfway out of the tunnel, hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face mixed with cave dirt. I looked back into the tunnel, empty, silent. No sound of scraping, no breathing, just the dark. I didn't say a word. I pushed past him, scrambling over the slick rock, running on hands and knees until I saw the gray light of the entrance. I burst out into the humid Kentucky air and collapsed in the dirt, gasping until I almost vomited. Lynn came out a minute later. He looked pale. He didn't ask what I saw. He just looked at the shaking of my hands, the blood on my arms. "Duke came back," he said quietly, barking his head off. Wouldn't stop. I figured something happened. We walked back to the cabin in total silence. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that pale, folded shape tumbling down the hill after us like a discarded spider. That night, Uncle Lynn didn't sit on the porch. He didn't drink his beer warm. He went to the kitchen drawer, found a screwdriver, and for the first time in his life, he fixed the deadbolt on the front door. Then he checked the back door, then the windows. He locked us in. He never asked me about the cave again. But sometimes, late at night, when the ceiling fan was clanking its rhythm, I'd see him standing by the window, staring out into the dark toward the ridge. He wasn't looking for thieves. He was waiting for the smile. Lynn locked his doors that night, terrified of what he might have invited in. But my friend Vane was different. He saw a locked door not as protection, but as a challenge. He wanted to know what was on the other side, even if it meant opening a door that could never be closed again. The pillar that walked. Vane was the kind of person who saw a do not enter sign as a personal invitation. We weren't spelunkers. We weren't even hobbyists. We were just two idiots with an addiction to places that common sense said we shouldn't be. Storm drains, abandoned mines, cracks in the limestone barely wider than our shoulders if it was dark, tight, and forgotten. Vane wanted to be inside it. This particular trip started with a survey he'd dug up from some digital archive at 3 a.m. It was an old, black and white document describing an abandoned coal corridor in eastern Kentucky. The text was dry, technical, and boring, except for one note scribbled in the margin next to a set of coordinates. Entrance sealed. Instability unresolved. That was all Vane needed. He sent me a text. Pack light. We parked the rental car near an old cattle gate and hiked for 3 hours through land that used to be a farm but was now just thorns and rust. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. By the time we found the crack in the rock face, the birds had stopped singing entirely. It wasn't much of an entrance, just a jagged vertical split wedged between two shale outcroppings, hidden by brush like nature was trying to stitch the wound closed. Vane grinned like a kid on Christmas morning. "That's it," he said, pulling a coil of rope from his pack. "That's the one." I stared at the crack. It looked like a mouth waiting to bite. "Maybe we should check for rattlesnakes first," I suggested, hoping a snake would pop out and give me an excuse to go home. "Don't be a wuss," he said, clipping into his harness. He went first. I followed. The shaft was tight, 20 feet straight down, then a hard elbow turn into a crawl space that forced you to twist your body sideways just to get your shoulders through. The tunnel ahead was all stone and skin. We army crawled for 20 minutes, dragging our packs behind us, the rocks scraping against our helmets. The walls were unnaturally smooth here, polished not by water, but by something else. Friction, movement. I tried not to think about it. Finally, the passage widened. We crawled out into a larger space and stood up, our headlamps cutting through the gloom. The chamber was wide, arched, maybe 30 feet high at the peak. The ceiling curved like the inside of a massive skull. But it wasn't the size of the room that made us stop. It was what stood in the center. Rising from the floor was a pillar. It was about 12 feet tall, perfectly vertical, smooth, and gray. It didn't look like limestone. It looked like ash that had been compressed into stone. It was too clean. No cracks, no water deposits, no irregularity. Just a perfect cylinder standing in the middle of a chaotic, natural cave. Vane walked up to it, his light playing over the surface. "That's not part of the cave," he said. He reached out to touch it. "Don't," I said. The word came out sharper than I intended. He looked back at me, eyebrow raised. "It's a rock, man. It doesn't look like a rock." He didn't touch it. We stood there for a long time, just watching it. The pillar didn't reflect our lights. It seemed to swallow them. It had a presence, a weight that pressed against the back of my neck. Eventually, the creep factor got too high even for Vane. We crawled back out and set up camp just outside the entrance. That night, the woods were dead silent. No crickets, no wind, just a heavy, suffocating stillness. We ate our beans in silence and turned in early. Sometime after 2 a.m., Vane shook me awake. "Did you go back in?" he hissed. I blinked, groggy and confused. "What?" "No, I was asleep." He looked pale in the moonlight. "I heard you," he whispered. "I heard you laughing in there. You were dreaming." "I wasn't dreaming." He was shivering, his eyes wide and darting toward the cave entrance. "I heard you laugh. It sounded like you, but wrong. Stretched out, and then I yelled your name. And you didn't answer, but something else did." "What did it say?" "It didn't say anything. It just made a sound, like a voice trying to be a voice." I told him to go back to sleep, that the acoustics of the cave were playing tricks on his brain. He didn't look convinced, but he eventually lay back down. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I lay there listening to the silence, waiting for a laugh that wasn't mine. We went back in the next morning. Vane insisted. He needed to prove to himself that he was just hearing things. We dropped down the shaft, crawled through the squeeze, and entered the main chamber. I stopped dead. Vane bumped into me. "What is it?" he asked. "Look." The pillar was gone. In its place was a hole. A perfect, circular hole about 6 feet wide, dead center in the chamber floor. The edges were impossibly smooth, like they had been cut with a laser. "We missed this," Vane stammered. "We must be in a different room." "We aren't," I said, pointing to a scuff mark on the wall from my boot the day before. "This is the room." The pillar was right here. Vane walked to the edge of the hole and shined his light down. "It's deep," he said. "I can't see the bottom." "We're leaving," I said. "Now?" "No way. This is it. This is what the note meant. Unresolved instability. The floor probably collapsed overnight and took the pillar with it, without making a sound. We were 50 feet away, Vane. We would have felt it." He ignored me. He was already setting up the anchor for the rope. "I'm going down, just for a look." Against every instinct screaming in my brain, I helped him rig the line. He clipped in and lowered himself into the black. I watched his light shrink until it was just a pinprick. 30 seconds, I counted out loud. He's still dropping. Finally, the tension went off the rope. "I'm down," his voice echoed up. "It's weird down here." "Define weird," I shouted. "The walls," he yelled back. "They're slick, like they've been oiled. And there are markings." "What kind of markings?" "Gouges. Deep ones. Jagged. Horizontal. They look melted." I didn't like the sound of that. "Vane, come back up." "Hold on. I'm gonna take some photos." Silence. I waited, counting the seconds. 10, 20, 30. "Vane?" Nothing. "Vane!" Then I heard it. A sound coming from above me, from the rim of the hole I was standing next to. It was a laugh. It was Vane's laugh. But it was wrong. It was slow, distorted, like a tape recording played at half speed. "Ha, ha, I spun around, shining my light up at the ceiling, then back down at the hole. "Vane?" I whispered. "Vane?" A voice replied. It came from the darkness of the hole, but it wasn't Vane. It was a perfect mimicry of my own voice, but flattened, devoid of emotion. Then Vane screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of pure, primal terror. "Pull me up! Pull me up!" I grabbed the rope and hauled. He was scrambling, kicking against the walls, dead weight on the line. I pulled until my muscles burned. His helmet popped over the rim, his face white as a sheet. "Run," he gasped. "Run! What is it? What did you see?" He didn't answer. He just unclipped and scrambled for the exit tunnel. I looked back at the hole one last time. Something was rising. It wasn't climbing the rope. It was climbing the smooth, oiled walls of the shaft. Limbs that were too long, bent at too many angles, pale and slick against the dark stone. It moved with a fluid, jerky rhythm, slide, twitch, slide. It reached the rim. I saw a hand. No, not a hand. It had too many fingers, and they were all the wrong length. It gripped the edge of the hole, then a face crested the lip. It was smooth, featureless. No eyes, no nose, just a slit for a mouth, and it was making a sound. Who? It was inhaling, tasting the air. Then it spoke. "Run," it said. It was Vane's voice. Perfect, identical. I turned and bolted. I dove into the crawl space, shredding my knees, dragging my pack. I could hear Vane ahead of me, hyperventilating. Behind me, I heard a wet, slapping sound. Slap, drag, slap, drag. It was coming. We hit the squeeze. I shoved Vane through, panic making me clumsy. He got stuck for a second, thrashing, before popping out the other side. I followed, twisting my body, feeling the rock press against my chest. My foot caught on something. The rope bag. I kicked it free, but in that split second, I looked back. The thing was in the tunnel. It filled the space completely. It was compressing itself, its body flowing like putty to fit the narrow passage. It didn't have eyes, but I knew it was looking at me. "Wait," it said. It used my voice this time. "Wait." I screamed and kicked backward, my boot connecting with something soft and wet. It didn't recoil, it just absorbed the blow. I scrambled up the vertical shaft, adrenaline giving me strength I didn't know I had. Vane hauled me over the lip of the entrance, and we collapsed in the dirt outside. The sun was shining, birds were singing. It was a normal Tuesday afternoon. We lay there gasping for air, staring at the dark crack in the rock. "The rope," Vane whispered. "We left the rope." I looked down. The rope we had used to climb the entrance shaft was gone. Not just pulled down, it was gone. The anchor was still there, wrapped around the tree, but the knot had been untied, cleanly. "How?" I choked out. "We just climbed it." Vane pointed to the ground near the entrance. There, neatly coiled in the dirt, was a brand new rope. It wasn't ours. It was a different color, a different brand. It looked expensive. And tied to the end of it was a note, written on a piece of paper that looked like it had been torn from a survey map. The handwriting was shaky, jagged. "Come deeper." We didn't take the rope. We ran back to the car, threw our gear in the trunk, and drove until we hit the state line. We didn't speak for 3 hours. Vane never went caving again. He sold his gear on eBay a week later. But sometimes, when I call him late at night, his voice sounds off. A little too flat, a little too perfect. And I wonder if the friend I dragged out of that hole is the same one who went in. Or if the thing in the hole just learned how to be him better than he could. Sound can be mimicked, faces can be copied. But time is harder to fake. And what happened to Vaughn in Slant Hollow proved that the caves don't just mess with your mind, they mess with the clock on the wall. Slant Hollow, the message in the stone. Sound can be mimicked. Faces can be copied. But time is harder to fake. And what happened to Vaughn in Slant Hollow proved that the caves don't just mess with your mind, they mess with the clock on the wall. Vaughn was a ghost I met on a dead forum. The kind of website that looks like it was built in 1999 black background, neon green courier font, and threads about rope thickness that hadn't been updated since the Bush administration. I was 21, broke, and trying to build a portfolio of cave maps to get hired by a survey company. I spent my nights lurking in these digital graveyards, looking for leads on undocumented systems. That's when Vaughn messaged me. Subject, Slant Hollow, unmapped, Southern WV. His message was clipped. Efficient. He claimed his grandfather owned a chunk of mountain in southern West Virginia that the coal companies had missed. He said there was a cave system there, Slant Hollow, that the locals wouldn't touch. He said he'd been inside, but never passed the second bend. Entrance is tight, he wrote. Air is wrong. Need a second man. We met 2 weeks later at a gravel pull-off near Franksburg. Vaughn was younger than I expected, mid-20s, shaved head, eyes that were constantly scanning the tree line. He didn't shake my hand. He just nodded at the woods and started walking. The hike was brutal. No trail, just a vertical slog through laurel hell and loose shale. We didn't talk. The woods were strangely silent. No birds, no squirrels. Just the crunch of our boots and the sound of my own heavy breathing. We found the entrance tucked under a shelf of roots and dirt, like a split in the skin of the earth. Vaughn rigged the anchor to an old dogwood tree. 15-foot drop, he said. Then he disappeared into the hole. I checked my watch before I followed him. 2:46 p.m. The descent was easy. We landed in a dry, dusty passage that smelled like old paper. The walls were sharp, brittle limestone, not the smooth, water-worn rock I was used to. It felt like the inside of a fossil. We moved fast. Vaughn had a strange energy, like he was late for something. He didn't mark his path, so I did yellow chalk arrows every 100 feet. We crawled through tight squeezes and walked through high, symmetrical chambers that felt too perfectly shaped to be natural. About an hour in, we found the bag. It was stuffed into a fissure near the floor of a cramped side tunnel. A green canvas military surplus bag, stiff with mold. Vaughn pulled it out, and we dumped the contents on the floor. Rotting clothes, a rusted folding knife, a plastic water bottle filled with black sludge, and a spiral notebook. The humidity had glued most of the pages together, but Vaughn carefully peeled them apart. He found a section near the middle that was still legible. He shined his light on the text, and I read over his shoulder. The handwriting started neat, but degraded into frantic scratches. Still deeper. Thought I turned around, but I keep ending up here. Can't tell if I'm going down or sideways anymore. I sleep but don't remember. Lights out. Woke up with dirt in my mouth. Something moved in the last room. Not alone. The final entry was just a scribble, a heavy, dark line where the pen had torn through the paper. Who was this? I whispered. Vaughn didn't answer. He was staring at the wall behind the bag. Look, he said. I turned my light. There were scratches on the wall. Fresh ones. White streaks in the gray dust, revealing the darker rock underneath. They were long, vertical gouges, grouped in pairs. They looked like they had been made by fingers, but fingers that were too hard and too sharp. We didn't see these when we came in, I said. We just got here, Vaughn replied. No. I mean, the dust is settling. These were made. Just now. A cold spike drove itself into my stomach. I shined my light down the tunnel. Darkness. Vaughn, we need to go. For the first time, he looked unsure. He nodded. We turned around and started crawling back the way we came. But 10 minutes later, I knew something was wrong. The tunnel didn't look right. The walls were smoother here, almost polished, and my chalk, marks the yellow arrows I had been so careful to draw, were gone. Not rubbed off. Gone. The dust was undisturbed. It was as if I had never touched the wall. Where are the marks? I asked, my voice rising. Vaughn stopped. He checked his compass. Needle spinning. He muttered. We kept moving because stopping felt like dying. The tunnel forked again and again. Choices I didn't remember making on the way in. My legs burned. My watch said we had been underground for 2 hours, but it felt like days. Then we found the boot. Just one hiking boot. sitting in the middle of the passage. It was torn open at the toe, peeled back like wet cardboard. No foot inside, just the boot. 100 feet further, we found a headlamp. It was the same model as mine. The light was blinking weakly, the low battery warning. Is someone else down here? I asked. Vaughn didn't answer. He was looking at the ceiling. New scratches, dozens of them. Long, frantic gouges in the rock, directly above our heads. They were organized in rows, precise and mechanical, like a tally. We pushed on. There was nowhere else to go. Then, up ahead, we saw it. Light. It wasn't daylight. It was amber, flickering and soft, like candlelight seen through a dirty window. It spilled out of a chamber ahead of us. Fire. Vaughn whispered. Who would build a fire down here? He stepped toward it. Vaughn. Wait. He didn't listen. He walked into the chamber. I stayed just outside the threshold, my hand gripping a rock, though I didn't know what I intended to do with it. Vaughn stood in the center of the room, staring up. The amber light wasn't coming from a fire. It was seeping out of the stone itself. The walls were translucent, glowing with a sickly, pulsing vein of orange light deep within the rock. It looked like the cave was running a fever, and the scratches were everywhere, floor to ceiling, thousands of them, covering every inch of the glowing walls. Vaughn turned to me. His face was slack, his eyes wide and empty. I've been here before, he whispered. No, you haven't. Vaughn, snap out of it. I wrote the message, he said. I remember the pen tearing the paper. He looked at his hands. They were covered in gray dust. Vaughn! I screamed. I lunged forward, grabbed the strap of his pack, and yanked him backward. He stumbled, blinking like he was waking up from a deep sleep. He looked at the glowing walls, then at me, and terror, pure, lucid terror, flooded his face. Run, he choked out. We ran. We didn't crawl. We scrambled, tearing our clothes, smashing our knees against the rock. We didn't look for marks. We didn't check the compass. We just ran away from the amber light. Eventually, the stone changed back. The smoothness disappeared, replaced by the sharp, brittle limestone. We found a yellow arrow, one of mine, then another. We followed them like a lifeline. The air grew cooler. We smelled dirt and pine. We burst out of the entrance hole, clawing our way up the rope, and collapsed onto the forest floor. I ripped the mask off my face and sucked in the air. I rolled over and looked at the sky. It was bright. Morning sun slanted through the trees. Birds were singing. I checked my watch. 5:32 p.m. I looked at Vaughn. He was staring at his phone, his face pale. What time is it? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. 2:03 a.m. We went in at 2:46 p.m. on Sunday. My watch said we had been down there for less than 3 hours, but the sun in Vaughn's phone said it was the next morning. We had lost 17 hours. 17 hours of memories. Gone. 17 hours where we weren't in the tunnel, or the glowing room, or anywhere that made sense. Vaughn didn't say a word on the hike back. He didn't speak in the car. When I dropped him off at his Jeep, he didn't even wave. I never saw him again. I checked the forum a month later. His account had been deleted. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about that notebook. I think about the handwriting that degraded into scratches. And I wonder if Vaughn really did write it. I wonder if we found his body in that bag, centuries before he was even born. Vaughn lost time, but Camden found something far worse. He found a place where physics was just a suggestion, and the architecture wasn't built by anything human. Morrow's Hole. The spiral architect. Vaughn lost time, but Camden found something far worse. He found a place where physics was just a suggestion, and the architecture wasn't built by anything human. I was working on a research grant from Eastmont University, tasked with documenting minor undocumented karst features in eastern Appalachia. It sounds glamorous. It wasn't. It was weeks of busting my knees on jagged limestone, sweating through my clothes, and scanning outdated geological surveys that were more fiction than fact. My partner was Camden. He was a good guy, The kind of caver who could rethread a busted descender in the pitch black with one hand. We split the work. He handled the rigging and logistics, and I handled the data mapping, sketching, measuring. We were a good team. Efficient. Bored. We had already logged 3 disappointment tubes, shallow, linear caves that went nowhere when we found the crack behind the old chapel ruins. Camden spotted it first. He was scouting a slumped section of the cliff face when he waved me over. "It's vertical," he said, brushing a thick layer of moss off the rock. "Can't see the bottom, but look at the edge." I leaned in. The opening wasn't a natural fissure. It was a clean, straight slit in the earth, maybe shoulder width. The edges were sharp, precise. It looked surgical, like someone had taken a scalpel to the mountain. "No tags," I noted. "No bolts. No trash." That was rare. Usually, if there's a hole in the ground in Kentucky, someone has already thrown a beer can into it. This one was pristine. We called it Morrow's Hole in our field notes, mostly because Chapel Crack sounded stupid. We rigged the rope and started the descent at 10 a.m. Camden went down first to test the air. 10 minutes later, his voice crackled over the radio. "Clear. But it's dry down here. Bone dry." I rappelled down. He was right. The shaft opened into a tight chamber at the bottom, and the air was desiccated. No moisture, no drips, no mud. The dust on the floor was fine as flour. We squeezed through a series of crawl spaces that scraped our packs against the ceiling. The rock here was strange. It wasn't layered like normal sedimentary limestone. It curved inward, forming smooth, rib-like arches that looked almost organic. "You could almost believe someone shaped this," Camden muttered, running his glove along a wall. "Water shaped it," I said automatically, though I didn't believe it. There was no sign of water erosion. No scallops, no flow marks. Just smooth, deliberate curves. We moved deeper. The tunnel opened into a medium-sized chamber with a vaulted ceiling. And there, in the center of the room, was the altar. I stopped dead. It was a square block of stone, waist-high, perfectly centered in the room. It wasn't a rockfall. It had been stacked. Camden approached it slowly. "Is that carved?" On the top surface of the stone block was a circular depression, like a basin. Inside the basin were spirals, but they weren't carved into the rock. The stone around them had been removed, leaving the spirals raised in relief. Camden traced one with his finger. "These go the wrong way," he whispered. "To carve this, you'd have to twist your arm backward. It's anatomically impossible." I took a photo, though my hands were shaking. I checked my compass to map the orientation of the room. The needle was spinning, not drifting. Spinning, round and round, smooth as a second hand on a clock. "Magnetic anomaly," I said, my voice tight. "Iron deposits, maybe." "Maybe," Camden said. He didn't sound convinced. We left the chamber through the center tunnel. The floor began to slope downward. I dropped a glow stick to mark the entrance. 30 meters in, the incline got steep, fast. I pulled out my inclinometer. "It says 15 degrees, I said. Camden braced his boots against the floor, sliding slightly. "Bullshit. This feels like 40. He was right. Gravity felt heavy, like the core of the earth was pulling harder than it should. My pack felt like it was filled with lead. Every step was a struggle against a force that wanted to drag us down. "Let's turn around," I said. "This isn't right." We turned back. The glow stick was gone. I stared at the spot where I had dropped it. The floor was bare. No stick. No dust disturbance. I dropped it right there, I said. "Maybe it rolled," Camden said, shining his light down the slope. Uphill, we walked back toward the altar room. But the tunnel had changed. The walls were different. The rib-like curves were sharper, more aggressive. And the scrape marks from our gear on the way in, gone. We entered the chamber. It was silent. Dead silent. I clapped my hands. Clap. No echo. The sound just died, instantly absorbed by the walls. It was like being inside a soundproof booth. Camden pointed at the floor. "Look, 2 long drag marks. parallel and human-sized, entered the room from the left tunnel and stopped dead in the center. There were no footprints leading to them, just the drag marks, starting from nothing. Camden mouthed something to me. I saw his lips move, but I heard nothing. The silence was absolute. Then the vibration started. It was a low thrum, buried deep in the stone walls. It wasn't a noise, it was a frequency. I felt it in my teeth. We ran. We took the right-hand tunnel, abandoning the survey plan. I just wanted out. Every few meters, I saw the same pattern on the wall, a specific chip in the rock, followed by a yellow mineral streak. "We're looping!" I shouted, though the sound of my own voice was muffled and dead. I've seen that chip 5 times. I stopped and made a mark on the wall with my chalk, a big X. We ran for another minute. We passed the chip again. My X was there, but next to it were 5 other X's, identical to mine. I hadn't made 6 marks. I had made 1. Camden grabbed my shoulder. His face was gray. "There's something on your hood." I reached back. "Nothing but dry fabric. Not you," he whispered, staring past me. "Above you." I looked up. Directly above my head, a hole had opened in the solid rock ceiling. It was a perfect circle, smooth-edged, black as pitch. It hadn't been there a second ago, and reaching out of it was a hand. It was pale, long, and thin. It had too many joints, and it was bent backward at the wrist, the fingers curling up toward the darkness instead of down. It waved. A slow, mocking flutter of fingers. Camden screamed. We didn't coordinate. We didn't plan. We just bolted. The tunnel began to tighten. It squeezed in on us, the rib-like walls pressing closer. We were crawling, scrambling, tearing the knees of our pants. "Light!" Camden yelled. Ahead, I saw a faint, gray filter of daylight. It was the bottom of the entrance shaft. I recognized the shape of the rock. We scrambled into the chamber. The rope was there, dangling from the darkness above. I grabbed it. It wasn't our rope. Our rope was a static 9mm, bright orange, brand new. This rope was thick, made of hemp or sisal, brown and rotting. It looked like it had been hanging there for 100 years. It was frayed and covered in dust. "It's not ours," I yelled. "Climb it," Camden screamed. "Just climb it." He clipped his ascender to the rotting fibers. I watched, terrified the rope would snap. It held. He scrambled up, dirt raining down on me. I clipped in. As I started to climb, I felt a vibration on the rope. Not from above, from below. Something had grabbed the end of the rope. I didn't look down. I climbed. I hauled myself up that shaft faster than I have ever moved in my life. I could feel the presence rising behind me, a cold pressure on the soles of my boots. I imagined those backward fingers brushing against my ankles. Camden grabbed my harness at the lip and yanked me over the edge. We collapsed into the moss and leaves. The sun was low in the sky. The light was orange, fading fast. "What time is it?" Camden gasped. I checked my watch. 6:15 p.m. We had gone in at 10 a.m. We had been in the cave for 8 hours. It had felt like 40 minutes. We didn't pack the gear. We left the bags. We left the carabiners. We sure as hell left that rotting rope. We ran to the truck and drove away, speeding down the fire road until we hit pavement. We never filed a report. We told the university the coordinates were a bust, just a solid rock face. Camden quit caving. He moved to Arizona, somewhere flat and dry where you can see the horizon for miles. But sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet room, I hear it. That low vibration, that thrum in the walls, and I wonder if the X I marked on the wall is still there, waiting for me to come back and add the 7th one. Gravity was wrong in Morrow's hole, but at least the cave didn't have a name for us. For Micah, the cave wasn't just a place. It was a person, and she was lonely. Mother's mouth, the sacrifice. Obsession draws you in. But sometimes the map itself is the lure. Micah wasn't just a spelunker. He was an archivist of holes. He collected them the way some people collect stamps or rare coins. but his collection was made of negative space. He kept a folder on his laptop labeled openings, filled with PDFs of mining reports from the 1800s and blurry JPEGs of sinkholes. He called himself a speleoarchaeologist, a word he made up to sound important, but the look in his eyes wasn't academic. It was hungry. We were friends in that loose, collegiate way where you share a hobby but not a soul. We hiked. We drank cheap beer. But after spring break of our sophomore year, Micah changed. He stopped coming to parties. He stopped answering texts. When he did show up to our outdoor club meetings, he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He had scratches on his forearms and a new, unsettling habit of staring at the corner of the room like he was waiting for the wall to open up. "I found her," he told me once, his voice a low thrum. "Found who?" I asked. "She lives under," he said. And then he smiled, a tight, secretive expression that made my skin crawl. He started posting videos on a private Instagram account. They were short, shaky clips of him deep underground. Just his face, illuminated by a dying headlamp, reflected in a wet limestone wall. He would whisper things like, "She remembers the cuts," or, "It changes shape when I'm not watching." I almost unfollowed him. I thought he was having a breakdown. Then Elle arrived. Elle was an exchange student from Busan, a geology major with a sharp mind and a quiet, intense curiosity. She joined our club, and for a few weeks, things felt normal. She was grounded, scientific. She looked at rocks and saw strata, not monsters. Micah fixated on her immediately. "She has cave eyes," he told me after their first meeting. "What does that even mean?" "It means she can see in the dark. She fits." I should have stopped it there. I should have told Elle to stay away from him. But when Micah sent us the coordinates 2 weeks later, with a message that just said Mother's Mouth, no markers, bring a light, Elle was the one who wanted to go. "The topography here is anomalous," she said, looking at a satellite map. "There shouldn't be a rift cave at this elevation. If he found one, it's significant." So we went. We drove 2 hours into the backcountry near Riverton, following a logging road that hadn't seen a truck in 20 years. We found Micah's car parked in a clearing, covered in leaves. It looked like it had been there for days. He was waiting for us by a pile of brambles. He looked thin, his clothes stained with red clay. "You came," he said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Elle. "Where is it?" Elle asked, all business. Micah pulled back the brambles to reveal a hole. It wasn't a natural opening. It looked like a tear in the fabric of the hill, wet and glistening. An old, rusted couch spring was tangled in the roots above it, looking like a set of metal teeth. "Mother's Mouth," Micah whispered. We descended. The cave was tight, slick, and smelled of wet copper. Micah moved through it with a terrifying familiarity. He didn't check his footing. He didn't look for handholds. He just slid through the darkness like he was being pulled by a string. "Look at the walls," he murmured, running his fingers over the stone. I shined my light. The walls were covered in carvings. They weren't graffiti. They weren't Jeff Loves Mary 1986. They were intricate, organic patterns, spirals that looked like DNA, jagged loops that resembled nerve endings, shapes that mimicked the branching of veins. They covered every inch of the rock. Elle stopped. She crouched down, examining a cluster of spirals. "These aren't glacial striations," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And they aren't tool marks. There's no chipping, no impact fractures. It looks eroded, like acid." "She made them," Micah said from the darkness ahead. "Who made them?" Elle asked. "She did, to tell us where to cut." We entered a small, round chamber. The ceiling was low, curving down to meet the floor like the inside of a bowl. The air here was thick, heavy, and hot. It felt like standing inside a mouth. Micah turned to face us. He was beaming. "This is her room," he said. "Okay," I said, my nerves fraying. "We saw it. It's cool. Let's go." "She's not done yet," Micah said. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small figure. It was made of bone, small, bird-like bones lashed together with something dark and sticky. It had long, distorted limbs and a wide, gaping mouth. "I made this," he said, holding it out to Elle. "She asked me to give it to you." Elle took a step back. "I don't want that." "You already do," Micah said. "You have cave eyes. You belong here." He stepped toward her. I moved to intercept him. "Micah, back off." He didn't even look at me. He spun, his movement fluid and violent, and shoved me. I hit the wall hard, my head cracking against the stone. My vision swam. When I looked up, Micah had Elle pinned against the far wall. He was pressing the bone figure against her chest, whispering frantically, "She needs you. You're the vessel. You're the key." Elle screamed. She kicked him hard in the shin, the sound of boot hitting bone echoing in the small room. Micah stumbled back, but he was laughing. A high, breathless giggle. I tackled him. We hit the floor, rolling in the mud. He was surprisingly strong, his muscles corded and tense. He clawed at my face, his fingers digging for my eyes. "She's hungry," he shrieked. "Don't you get it? She's starving." His flashlight spun away, the beam strobing across the walls. In the flashes of light, I saw the carvings. They were moving. The spirals were twisting. The veins were pulsing. I punched him. Once. Twice. I felt his nose break under my knuckles. He went limp for a second. "Run!" I yelled at Elle. She grabbed my arm and yanked me up. We scrambled back into the tunnel. We ran. We didn't look back, but I could hear him behind us. He wasn't running. He was chanting, a low, rhythmic sound that vibrated through the floor. At the first bend, I looked back. Micah was standing in the center of the chamber. He wasn't chasing us. He was standing with his arms wide open, his head thrown back, embracing the dark, and the walls were closing in on him, not falling, closing. The rock was flowing like thick wax, sealing the chamber, swallowing him whole. We burst out of the cave entrance and into the sunlight. We collapsed by the car, gasping, bleeding, terrifyingly alive. We called the police. The rangers came out with dogs. They found the entrance. They found the first tunnel, but the chamber was gone. The tunnel ended in a solid wall of limestone. No collapse, no rubble, just unbroken, ancient rock. The dogs sniffed at the wall and whined, refusing to go near it. Micah's car was towed a week later. He was listed as a missing person. Elle transferred to a university in California. We don't talk much anymore, but sometimes she sends me a text. Just one word, vines. I know what she means. I see them too, in the cracks of the sidewalk, in the patterns of the clouds. Micah gave himself to the cave, but Milo was taken. Obsession draws you in, but sometimes the map itself is the lure. The ribcage and the glowing arch. My cousin Milo had a map. That's how it always starts, isn't it? He bought it from an old man selling pocket knives and belt buckles at the Salina flea market. It was a topographic survey of the Timber Hollow National Forest, crumpled and faded to the color of tea stains. But what made it special, what made Milo pay $20 for a piece of trash, was the single, hand-drawn pencil line running straight through the middle of the wilderness. No trail markers, no ranger stations, just a gray line cutting through contour intervals like a scar. "It's a shortcut," Milo told me over coffee, his eyes bright with that dangerous, manic energy he got when he smelled a secret, or an old miner's route. Either way, it goes somewhere nobody else goes, or it goes off a cliff, I said. "Don't be boring." We packed his Wrangler on a Friday morning. We brought the standard kit: ropes, harnesses, headlamps, backup batteries, first aid. Milo, being Milo, also packed a bag of glow sticks, a chalk marker, and a GoPro he strapped to his chest like Iron Man. We drove until the GPS gave up. Then we drove until the road gave up. We parked on a patch of weeds that might have been a fire lane in the 70s and started hiking. We followed the pencil line. It took us through thickets of rhododendron so dense we had to crawl, and up slopes that were more mud than dirt. But after an hour, we found it. A sinkhole. It wasn't huge, maybe 15 feet across, but it was perfectly round, like an eye socket punched into the forest floor. The edges were draped in vines, hiding the drop. Milo grinned. Jackpot. He dropped a rock. We waited. 1, 2, 3. Thud. 30 feet. Milo estimated. Doable. He rigged the rope to a sturdy oak. He went first, rappelling down with a whoop of excitement. I followed, less enthusiastic, watching the circle of sky shrink above me. We landed on a pile of loose debris in a chamber that was surprisingly large and dry. The air down there was bone dry, smelling of nothing. Not rot, not water, not animals, just dust. We mark everything, Milo said, clicking his GoPro on. Chalk arrows every 50 feet. We moved deeper. The cave was a series of wide, comfortable tunnels. It felt welcoming. Too welcoming. The floor was relatively flat, the ceiling high. About 20 minutes in, we found the arch. It stood at the end of a long corridor. It wasn't a natural formation. It was a perfect, parabolic arch, 10 feet high, cut directly into the solid limestone wall. The edges were smooth, polished to a shine, but it was the markings that stopped us. Surrounding the arch were gouges in the rock, deep, parallel slashes, but they weren't vertical. They were angled forward, into the tunnel we had just come from. These look like claw marks, I said, shining my light on them. Yeah, Milo said, leaning in. But look at the angle. Whatever made these wasn't trying to get in. It was dragging itself out. A cold shiver went down my spine. Let's go back. Just a little further, Milo said. He walked through the arch. The tunnel on the other side was different. The walls here shimmered. I looked closer. Running through the rock were thin veins of something silver. It looked like mercury or liquid chrome, and it was pulsing. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. It was faint, but I could see the light shifting in the veins. Milo, I whispered. The rock is beating. Mineral deposits reflecting our lights, he said, dismissing it. Keep moving. We entered a massive chamber. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. The walls of the room curved up and over us in a series of perfect, smooth ridges. 12 of them, evenly spaced. White stone against the dark ceiling. It looks like a rib cage, I said. It's incredible, Milo whispered. He walked to the center of the room. I stayed near the entrance. I turned around to check our chalk mark on the archway. It wasn't there. The archway wasn't there. I spun around. The wall behind me was solid stone. No tunnel. No opening. Just smooth, white rock. Milo, I said, my voice high and thin. The door is gone. He turned slowly. What? The tunnel? It's gone. He ran to the wall. He touched it, slapping his palms against the stone. We just walked through here. It was right here. We're trapped, I said. The panic was rising in my chest, a hot, choking fluid. Then we heard it. Knock, knock, knock. It was a dull, flat sound, like knuckles rapping on a heavy wooden door, but it was coming from the floor. Milo froze. Did you hear that? He scribed. A long, slow dragging sound. Heavy, wet. Lights out. Milo hissed. We killed our headlamps. The darkness was absolute. Knock, knock, knock. Closer this time. Scrap. Something was moving in the room with us. I could hear the shift of dust, the faint whistle of air being displaced. I reached out and grabbed Milo's arm. He was trembling. Run, he whispered. Where? Anywhere. Just run. He clicked his light back on. A beam of white cut through the dark, and for a split second, I saw it. In the far corner of the ribcage room, something was uncoiling. It was pale and segmented, like a massive tapeworm made of human skin. It didn't have a face. It just had a mouth, a vertical slit running down the length of its head. It screeched, a sound like metal tearing. We ran. We bolted toward a dark opening on the far side of the room that I hadn't seen before. We sprinted down a tunnel that sloped sharply downward. It felt like we were running down a throat. Don't stop, Milo yelled. He was ahead of me. I tripped. My boot caught on a ridge of stone, and I went down hard, smashing my headlamp against the floor. The light died. "Milo!" I screamed. "My light! Wait, I'm here!" His voice came back. "I see a turn. Come on." I scrambled up, fumbling for my backup flashlight. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped it. I fell to my knees, feeling around in the dust. The scrape, it was right behind me. I found the light. I clicked it on. The tunnel ahead was empty. Milo, silence. Milo. I ran to the turn he'd mentioned. I rounded the corner. The tunnel ended. It was a dead end. Solid rock. But on the floor, burning bright red, was Milo's road flare, and next to it was a streak. A long, wet smear in the dust, leading straight into the solid wall. "Milo!" I pounded on the rock. It was cold and unyielding. He was gone. No scream. No struggle. Just gone. I turned around. I was alone in the dark with the thing that knocked. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly. I ran through tunnels that twisted and turned, passing the same rock formations over and over again. Then I saw it. Ahead of me, in the distance, was a glow. It wasn't daylight. It was a soft, blue luminescence. I sprinted toward it. As I got closer, I saw that it was another archway. But this one wasn't made of stone. It was made of light. The edges were fuzzy, vibrating. I didn't care. It was a way out, or a way to die. Either was better than staying here. I squeezed my eyes shut and threw myself through the arch. There was a sensation of falling, of cold wind rushing past my ears, of my stomach turning inside out. Then I hit the ground. Hard. I rolled over, gasping. I was lying in tall grass. The sky above me was blue. The sun was shining. I sat up. I was in a field. I looked around. I recognized the ridgeline in the distance. I was 2 miles east of where we had parked the car. There was no hole in the ground near me. No cave entrance. Just grass and wildflowers. I walked back to the car. It took me an hour. When I got there, Milo's Wrangler was still parked in the weeds. I waited by the car for 2 days. He never came out. The rangers searched for weeks. They found the sinkhole eventually, but it only went down 20 feet and ended in a solid dirt floor. No tunnels, no archway, no ribcage room. They never found Milo. They never found his gear. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night and the road is quiet, I hear it. Knock, 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 coming from the trunk. Milo vanished into a wall. But Delmare found a place where the walls didn't just move. They remembered. And they could replay your own death before it even happened. The echo of the future. I ran through light to escape. But Delmare ran into a loop. Space twisted for Milo. For Delmare, it was time that broke. Delmare was my older cousin. The kind of guy who finished a forestry degree just so he could disappear into the woods for a living. He didn't like people much. He liked trees, silence, and old maps that led to nowhere. He found the coordinates on a forum so obscure it hadn't seen a new post since the Bush administration. The thread was titled simply, "The Breathing Room." Attached was a grainy satellite image of a ridge in the southern Appalachians, and a single sentence. "Go in clean, come out fast." "It's probably a coal shaft," I told him as we packed. "Or a bear den. Bear dens don't inhale," Delmare said, tapping the screen. We drove 3 hours to a gravel pull-off near the state line. We hiked for another 2, bushwhacking through laurel hell until we found the ridge. The entrance was hidden under a curtain of ivy, a black mouth in the gray stone. It was dry, bone dry. The air coming out of it wasn't cool and damp like a normal cave. It was warm, and it moved in a slow, rhythmic cycle. Whoosh, out, may. It sounded like the earth was sleeping. "You feel that?" Delmare whispered. "Air pressure changes," I said, trying to sound rational. "Barometric shift." "Sure." He clicked on his headlamp. "Let's go." We dropped into the entrance. The tunnel was smooth limestone, worn into sweeping curves like the inside of a massive artery. We walked for an hour, marking our path with white chalk arrows on the wall. The silence was absolute, heavy enough to press against my eardrums. About 2 hours in, the rock changed. The gray limestone gave way to a dull, matte black stone that seemed to absorb our lights, and the walls were marked. Long, crescent-shaped grooves were carved into the rock at odd heights. They weren't tool marks. They were smooth, as if the rock had been melted like wax and then hardened again. Delmare ran a gloved hand over one. It's still warm. I didn't like that. I checked my watch. 2:15 p.m. We reached a massive chamber. The ceiling was lost in the gloom above us. The floor sloped down into a pit so deep our lights couldn't find the bottom. We sat on the rim to drink some water. Then we heard it. Wheat. A whistle. High, sharp, and brief. It didn't echo. In a chamber this size, a sound like that should have bounced for seconds. It just stopped, as if the air had swallowed it. Did you do that? Delmare asked, his voice tight. We're leaving. He stood up and turned around. I followed, relieved. We walked back toward the tunnel we had come from, but when we reached the entrance to the passage, Delmare stopped. Where's the mark? He asked. I shined my light on the wall. The white chalk arrow I had drawn was gone. The wall was pristine black stone. Maybe we missed it, I said. Maybe it's further back. We walked. We checked every wall. No chalk. No scuffs. No boot prints in the dust. It was as if we were the first people to ever step foot in there. We're lost, I said, panic rising in my chest. We're not lost, Delmare snapped. It's a straight tunnel. There were no turns. We kept walking. The tunnel sloped downward, which felt wrong. We should be going up. Then we saw it. Etched into the wall at eye level was a tag. VL1979. Okay, Delmare said, exhaling. A tag. Someone's been here. We're on a route. We walked for another 20 minutes. The tunnel curved left, and there, on the wall, was the tag. VL1979. Wait, I said. Did we turn around? No, Delmare said. We've been walking straight. Then why is the tag here again? Maybe he marked it twice. We walked faster. 10 minutes later, Stop, I said. We're in a loop. It's not a loop, Delmare yelled, his voice cracking. The compass has been pointing north the whole time. He showed me the compass. The needle was steady. Then why do we keep passing the same tag? We pushed on. The air grew heavier. The rhythmic breathing of the cave got louder, faster. Whoosh. Huh. Whoosh. Huh. Like it was waking up. Then, the tunnel opened into a small, circular alcove we hadn't seen before. In the center of the room lay 3 sleeping bags. They were zipped up, arranged in a neat triangle. Beside them were 3 packs. Hello? Delmare called out. Silence. We approached the camp. The gear looked old. 72nd style. Canvas packs. Heavy wool blankets. Delmare unzipped one of the bags. Empty. He checked the others. Empty. No clothes, no bodies. But there was a knife jammed into the stone floor next to one bag, driven in deep, and on the wall above the sleeping bags, carved into the rock in jagged, frantic letters. Go back. This isn't right. Delmare whispered. These bags, they aren't dusty. He touched the canvas. They're dry, clean. He shone his light around the room. On the other side of the alcove, there was another carving. Vultisuch. Devetsto. Devetinsedemdeset. It's them, I realized. The tag. It's the people who left this gear. Where did they go? Then we heard the clicking. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. It was the sound of metal tapping on stone. Slow. Rhythmic. Coming from the tunnel ahead of us, the only way forward. Delmare grabbed my arm. Radio check. I keyed the mic. Static. Dead white noise. The clicking got louder. Faster. Tick, 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 tick. Run, Delmare said. We ran back the way we came. We passed the VL1979 tag again, and again, and again. The loop was tightening. The tunnel seemed to be stretching and compressing like an accordion. I was panting, my lungs burning. "Delmare, stop. We're not getting anywhere." He stopped, spinning around, his light cutting wild arcs in the darkness. "We have to find a turn. There has to be a turn. Delmare," a voice said. We both froze. The voice came from behind us, from the dark tunnel we had just run through. "Delmare, this way." It was my voice. I stared at Delmare. His eyes were wide, the white showing all around the irises. "I didn't say that," I whispered. "Over here," the voice said again. It sounded breathless, panicked, exactly like me. "Run." And then the sound of boots running. Thump, thump, thump. Coming toward us. "It's catching up," Delmare screamed. He grabbed me and shoved me into a narrow fissure in the wall I hadn't seen before. It was a tight squeeze, a vertical crack barely wide enough for a human. We scrambled up it, chimneying between the rock faces, tearing our clothes, scraping our skin raw. Below us, in the main tunnel, the footsteps thundered past, and then my own voice, screaming from the dark below. "It's right behind me! Delmare!" Then a wet, crunching sound, and silence. We didn't stop climbing. We climbed until our muscles failed, until our fingers were bleeding. Suddenly, the rock above us gave way to dirt, roots. We clawed through the earth and burst out into the cool night air. We collapsed on the ground, gasping, shaking. We were on the side of the ridge, surrounded by trees. "What was that?" I choked out. "What the hell was that?" Delmare didn't answer. He was staring at the sky. "It's dawn," he whispered. I looked up. The sky was turning gray in the east. "We went in at noon," I said. "It felt like 2 hours. "Check the date," he said, pointing at his watch. I looked. The date was right, but the time was wrong. It was 6 a.m. We had been underground for 18 hours. We hiked back to the car in silence. When we got to the pull-off, Delmare's car was covered in a thin layer of pollen, like it had been sitting there for days. We never talked about it. Delmare moved to the coast a month later. He lives on a boat now. He won't go near anything deeper than a swimming pool. But sometimes I dream about that tunnel. I dream about the voice calling my name. And I wonder, if we had stayed in that fissure a little longer, would we have seen ourselves run past? Or would we have seen what was chasing us? Delmare erased his data, but Caleb kept the gear. That was a mistake. Time loops are bad, but finding a bunker of monsters is worse. The bunker and the poisoned vault, 2 different caves, 2 different horrors, 1 ending. Whether it's monsters or microscopic bacteria, the cave always finds a way in. Caleb was the kind of guy who treated caving like a competitive sport. He didn't just want to find a cave. He wanted to conquer it. He'd spent months hounding me about a rumor he'd heard from his brother's ex-military buddy, a pristine, unmapped system somewhere in the Appalachians. "It's a gold mine," he kept saying. "Chambers that have never seen a human footprint." I should have laughed it off. But curiosity is a disease, and I was infected. We packed up the Jeep at 4 a.m. on a Friday. Me, Caleb, Jules, and Tyler. Jules was a wilderness guide, tough as nails. Tyler was ex-ROTC, obsessed with gear. We were prepared. Or so we thought. The entrance was exactly where the hand-drawn map said it would be, a narrow crack in a limestone bluff, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines. It looked like a wound that refused to heal. We geared up and went in. The crawl was brutal, 20 yards of belly dragging through sharp rock. But then it opened up. The silence hit us first. Caves are usually noisy, dripping water, airflow, the echo of your own movement. This place was dead. The air was still and stagnant, smelling of nothing. We pushed deeper for 2 hours. The tunnel shifted from cramped and rough to oddly uniform. The walls became smoother. The floor leveled out. Then we found the pocket chamber. It was a small room, slick with condensation that had no source. On one wall was a fissure, about 3 feet off the ground. "That's the way," Caleb said. Already climbing. We followed him up the vertical shaft. It was tight. a chimney climb that required pressing your back against one wall and your feet against the other. At the top, we spilled out into a massive dome. It was breathtaking. 50 feet across, the ceiling lost in shadow. But it was the far wall that drew our eyes. Carved into the stone was a perfect, circular hole, 3 feet wide, smooth as glass. It didn't look eroded. It looked engineered. "This is wrong," Jules whispered. It wasn't meant for us. Caleb ignored her. He dove into the hole. Tyler followed. Then Jules. Then me. The tunnel inside the hole was smooth. Too smooth. Under my gloves, I could feel grooves etched into the rock. Geometric patterns. Sharp lines. Angles that didn't occur in nature. Then the tunnel opened into the bunker. That's the only word for it. It was a square room, the size of a warehouse. The walls were flat, seamless, and covered in etched symbols. Not writing. Geometry. And in the center of the floor, Caleb was crouched over something. "Look," he said. "Footprints. They were long and thin. They looked like they belonged to a biped, but the toes, there were 6 of them. And they were splayed wide, like fingers. There were dozens of prints, pacing back and forth in the dust. None of them lead out," Tyler noted, his voice shaking. Jules backed away. "I'm leaving." She turned and scrambled for the entrance tunnel. Then she stopped. "It's gone," she whispered. I ran over. The wall where we had entered the smooth, circular tunnel was gone. In its place was solid, seamless stone. Tyler grabbed his chisel and slammed it into the wall. Clang. It sounded like he was hitting steel. Not even a scratch. Then the lights flickered. My headlamp dimmed. Caleb's went out. "Battery check," I shouted. Then we heard it. Click, click, click. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It was the sound of tongue against teeth. Precise. Eager. "Don't move," Caleb hissed. I turned. Jules was staring into the far corner of the room. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the dying beam of my light. "There's something there," she whispered. "It's watching." Her light died. Then she screamed. It wasn't a long scream. It was cut short, like a radio being turned off. Then silence. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran blindly into the dark, my hands scraping against walls I couldn't see. Tyler was yelling behind me. I found a tunnel. I don't know how. A narrow, steep chute that hadn't been there before. I dove into it, sliding on my stomach, elbows catching on sharp angles. The clicking was right behind me. Fast. Click, 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 click. I crawled until my arms went numb, until the air changed. Suddenly, I was outside. I was lying in a field of grass, staring up at the stars. I was miles away from the entrance. I never found out where exactly. Rescue crews searched for days. They found nothing. No bunker. No carvings. No footprints. Just solid rock. Caleb, Jules, Tyler. They're still down there. Or maybe they aren't. Maybe they're somewhere else entirely. I still have my gear. It sits in my garage, covered in dust. I haven't touched it since. But sometimes, I wonder if the clicking stopped because I escaped. Or because it found something else to play with. Something like a family. My brother and I had talked about exploring Pit 84 for years. It was just a number on a map. A cave near Ashfield Fork that some blog from 2008 mentioned. The footing gets sketchy and the airflow is wrong. The blogger wrote, "We took that as a challenge." We went a week before Christmas. Me, my brother, and his daughter, Wren. She was 15, smart as a whip, and glued to her GoPro. "Have fun with your intestinal frostbite," my wife had joked as we left. We hiked a half-mile through bare trees to the entrance. It was a jagged tier in the hillside, narrow as hell. We had to take off our packs to squeeze through. The air inside was cold and still. It felt like a sealed room. We moved fast, marking our turns with orange tape. Wren was having a blast, filming everything. "Creepy gold mines," she joked, filming a pile of small animal bones in a side tunnel. By 4 p.m., we reached the vault. It was a massive chamber, 30 feet across, with flowstone columns that looked like frozen trees. We set up camp. My brother heated up the lasagna packs. Vacuum sealed, shelf-stable camping food. Tastes like old pennies wrapped in wet paper, Ren complained. We ate it anyway. We were hungry. We went to sleep early. At 3:40 a.m., I woke up screaming. My stomach felt like it was being twisted in a vice. I unzipped my sleeping bag and crawled out of the tent, vomiting before I even made it 2 feet. I looked over. My brother was hunched by the cooler, dry heaving. His whole body was shaking. Then I heard Ren. She was coughing inside her tent, a wet, hacking sound. Ren? I called out. I can't move, she wheezed. Dad? I can't move my legs. Food poisoning. Or so I thought. Something's wrong. My brother groaned. He tried to stand and collapsed. We were paralyzed, trapped in the dark, miles underground, with our bodies shutting down. I managed to crawl to the sat phone. I called for help. Stay where you are, the dispatcher said. Do not try to leave the cave. The next 5 hours were a blur of pain and hallucinations. I wrapped Ren in blankets. My brother lay against the wall, muttering to himself. There's something breathing in here, he whispered. Do you feel that? I told him it was just the fever, but then the voices started. Low whispers, circling the camp. They didn't echo. They moved. They're behind the rocks. My brother hissed, his eyes wide and unseeing. Don't let them touch her. I sat there, clutching my flashlight, too weak to stand, listening to the whispers getting closer. When the rescue team arrived, it felt like a dream. Oxygen masks, stretchers, IVs. Ren spent 19 days in the hospital. Campylobacter. It was the lasagna. The food supplier had a contamination issue. 4 other hikers in different states were hospitalized. 2 died. It was bacteria. Microscopic, mindless bacteria. That's what the doctors said. But my brother, he hasn't gone hiking since. He sits in his house, staring at the corners of the room. I saw him. He told me once, drunk on whiskey, while we were sick, while we couldn't move. Saw who? The things in the vault. They weren't whispering, man. They were tasting the air. They were waiting for us to die. Ren boxed up her camera gear. She never uploaded the footage from Pit 84. I asked her why once. Because the camera was running while we were sick, she said, her voice flat. And there's something standing over my tent for 3 hours. I haven't stepped inside a cave since. And I never will. Because whether it's a monster with 6 toes or a bacteria that shuts down your nervous system, the result is the same. The cave wins. The surface is a lie. Most people look at a mountain and see strength. They see permanence. They see something solid that has outlasted empires and will outlast us all. They drive through the Blue Ridge Parkway, snap a photo of the rolling green hills, and tell themselves that the earth is beneath them, supporting them, holding them up. But we know better, don't we? We know that mountains are just masks. They are thin skins of dirt and trees draped over a hollow, rotting skull. The Appalachians aren't a monument. They are a honeycomb, a labyrinth of dead ends, time loops, and impossible geometry waiting for a single misstep to pull you in. These stories aren't just campfire tales. They aren't just urban legends concocted to scare children away from abandoned mines. They are warnings written in blood and chalk dust. They are the desperate scratches of fingernails on stone left by people who realized, too late, that they had walked into a stomach. Think about the patterns we've seen tonight. Really look at the synthesis of these phenomena. It isn't random bad luck. It's a design. Consider the mimicry. In story after story, we heard about voices. Uncle Lynn heard a growl that came from the dirt. Vane heard his own laugh stretched out and distorted. Delmare heard himself screaming from a future that hadn't happened yet. What kind of predator evolves to sound like your best friend? What kind of ecosystem produces a creature that knows exactly what a human scream sounds like, but doesn't know how to use the mouth that makes it? The implication is terrifying. They have been listening to us for a long time. They've been studying us from the cracks in the basement floor, learning our cadence, our panic, our desperate pleas for help. And they have learned that the easiest way to catch a human is to sound like another human. And then there is the architecture. This is the part that keeps me awake at night. We talked about rooms carved by hands that bend backward. We talked about pillars that vanish when you blink and spirals that twist the wrong way against the grain of the rock. Geology is slow. Geology is chaotic. Water and time create rough, organic shapes. But what Caleb found, what Camden found, that wasn't geology. That was engineering. The square bunker room with the six-toed footprints. The altar in Morrow's hole with the reverse-carved spirals. The smooth, oiled walls of the shaft that Vane descended. These aren't natural formations. Someone or something built them. There is an architect down there. There is an intelligence that understands geometry, acoustics, and perhaps even the fabric of reality itself better than we do. They are building something down there, and I don't think they are finished. The hunger is the final piece of the puzzle. The way the caves seem to breathe, to inhale, to taste the air for the scent of panic. Remember the way the tunnel closed behind Milo? The way the rock flowed to seal Micah inside? The earth isn't static rock. In these places, the earth is a muscle. It expands and contracts. It swallows. It's easy to dismiss these things when you're sitting in a warm room with the lights on. It's easy to say, that happened to someone else. That happened somewhere far away. I live in the suburbs. I live in the city. I am safe. But are you sure? Do you know what's under your house right now? The limestone shelf that runs beneath the Appalachians doesn't stop at the property line. It stretches for hundreds of miles. A dark, interconnected nervous system that runs beneath highways, shopping malls, and subdivisions. It runs under the foundation of the gas station where you fill your tank. It runs under the playground where your children play. And it runs under your bedroom. You might think you're safe because you live in a town, because you have neighbors and streetlights and paved roads. But pavement is just a bandage. It cracks. It erodes. And beneath it, the hollows are waiting. How many times have you seen a news story about a sinkhole swallowing a car, or a house, or a person sleeping in their bed? The news anchor calls it a tragic geological event. They talk about water tables and soil erosion. But look closely at the footage next time. Look at the edges of the hole. Are they rough and jagged? Or are they smooth? Are they architectural? Did the earth collapse? Or did something reach up and pull? We are intruders on this planet. We live on the surface, scurrying around in the sunlight, pretending we own the place. We build our little boxes of wood and glass, and we lock our doors, and we think we are the masters of our domain. But the real owners are down there, in the cold, in the silence. They have been there since before we climbed down from the trees, and they will be there long after we have burned ourselves out. And sometimes, they get hungry. But here is the worst part. The part that I haven't said out loud until now. I think they are rising. The stories are becoming more frequent. The sightings are moving closer to the surface. Vane found the pillar just a few hours from a farm. Delmare found the time loop near a popular hiking trail. The entity that mimicked Caleb's voice. It wasn't deep in the earth. It was right at the threshold. They are testing the perimeter. They are pushing against the skin of the world, looking for soft spots. They are learning that we are up here, warm and soft and full of blood. So, listen to me. Listen closely. Tonight, when you turn off the lights, do not just go to sleep. Lie there in the dark and listen to your house settle. Is that creak just a floorboard expanding in the heat? Or is it something pressing up against the foundation, testing the wood, looking for a weak point? Is that draft coming from a window you left open? Or is it the smell of stale metallic air coming from a vent that connects to a basement, which connects to a crack in the concrete, which connects to the dark? And that clicking sound, you know the one. You've heard it before. Maybe you told yourself it was the radiator. Maybe you told yourself it was a branch tapping against the siding. Maybe you told yourself it was just your imagination. But ask yourself this. Does a radiator click with a rhythm? Tick-tock, tick-tock. Does a branch tap back when you hold your breath? Is it the house settling? Or is it the sound of tongue against teeth, pacing back and forth in the crawl space, waiting for you to fall asleep? If you hear it, do not investigate. Do not go down to the basement with a flashlight to check the breaker box. Do not put your ear to the floorboards, because if you can hear them, they can hear you. We are Dread Shadow. and I have dedicated my life to mapping the edges of this darkness. I collect these stories not just to entertain you, but to arm you. Knowledge is the only weapon we have against the things that dwell in the deep. If you want to survive the night, hit that subscribe button. It's not just a click, it's a signal. It tells the algorithm and perhaps something else that you are watching, that you are aware, that you are not just prey waiting to be taken. Share this video with someone you want to keep safe. Send it to your brother who hikes on the weekends. Send it to your friend who just bought an old house with a deep cellar. Warn them, because the only thing worse than being alone in the dark is finding out you aren't alone at all. Join the community in the comments below. Tell me, have you heard the clicking? Have you seen a shadow in your home that shouldn't be there? Have you ever found a door locked that you swore you left open? Let's document the rise together. Let's create a map of the danger zones before it's too late. But right now, as the video ends and the screen goes black and you see your own reflection in the glass, take a moment. Listen to the silence of your room. Is it empty? Are you sure? And whatever you do, whatever you hear scratching beneath your floorboards tonight, don't look down.